Mary Ellen, can you please call the roll?
Commissioner Tedesco, Commissioner Volpe, Commissioner Clark.
Here.
Commissioner Woloski, alternate Commissioner Caird,
Here.
alternate Commissioner Coviello, alternate Commissioner Coles,
Present.
alternate Commissioner Ma.
Here.
Here.
Chair Hammersley.
Hammersley's here. I did hear from Commissioner Volpe and Commissioner Coviello will not be joining us tonight. We'll seat both of our alternate commissioners, one for Commissioner Volpe, one for Commissioner Tedesco. I did not hear from Nick or from Steve, so they may be showing up at some time soon. But with our shuffling of the deck here a little bit, we do have a quorum. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We can all remain standing for a moment of silent reflection, please. All right, thank you very much. Looking for a motion to approve our minutes from our last meeting on October 18th, 2022.
So move, Mr. Chairman. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 7, subcommittee reports. Is there anything? Nobody has anything? Anything else? Let's move right into the public hearing segment. But before I do that, I'm going to read a brief statement. Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Southington Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Robert Hammersley. I'm the chair of the commission. I'd like to take a few moments to explain the meeting format. Aside from administrative items, which you just heard, tonight's meeting is comprised of 2 parts, a public hearing and a business meeting. During the public hearing, the applicant will come up and present the application to us in detail, which will allow the commission members and the public the opportunity to better understand what is being proposed. The commission members may ask questions during the presentation if needed. Then we will ask members of the public who support or oppose the application to speak. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized by myself. Once recognized, come forward to the podium, right over there. State your name and your address for the record, and please address all comments directly to myself and not to the applicant or other members of the public. Be advised, this is your opportunity to ask questions and make comments on the application, because once a public hearing is closed, no additional testimony from the public or the applicant will be permitted. It's important to maintain order and decorum at all times during the meeting. After everyone has had a full opportunity to speak, all questions have been answered and all information has been received, we will decide whether it is appropriate to close the public hearing. And we will not consider voting on the application until the business meeting portion of the agenda. During the business meeting, we'll deliberate on the applications submitted to the commission and decide how to act on them. The commission may 1, approve the application as submitted. 2, approve it with stipulations, conditions, or modifications. 3, table the action for a future meeting, or finally, in some cases, we may deny an application. 4 affirmative votes of the commission are generally required to approve any application. If you have to leave the meeting before a decision is rendered, please call Mary Ellen at the planning department tomorrow, and you can get the results from tonight's meeting. With that, let's open the public hearing on item 8A. AA Denorfia Building and Development LLC special permit application to construct an active adult housing development in an R-zone with a private road, sewer, water, utilities, storm drainage, and other necessary improvements. Property located at 570 Middlebury Turnpike, Zone Arch, SPU 666. This was tabled from our last meeting on October 18th. Mr. Judas, take it away.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commission members. For the record, my name is Stephen Judas with the office of Harry Cole & Son at 876 South Main Street in Plantsville.
Steve, could you get a little bit closer?
I'm
please?
trying.
The audio in the
this?
room is not situated for people up here.
I feel like I have to get it right up
There you go.
really close.
All helps. Thank you.
We'll get you a headset next
It's
time.
it's very close. I don't know if you guys. It's a little uncomfortable, but. So tonight I'm here on behalf of A. Denorfia Building Development, with offices located at 133 Main Street. Tonight, Tony Denorfia and Matt and Andy are with here for our application at 570 Merida Waterbury Turnpike. The property is owned by Cecilia Dokar. Did I say that right? I'll get to that. It's part of 570. It's going to be known as 580. I'll explain that in a second. We had been before this commission a few months past with a public hearing for an ARC zone change that was this commission approved, and we therefore moved forward through did a site and special permit application, and then did all the detailed engineering that was required to move this forward. What we have is an 8.7 acre parcel. Originally, it was the house was known as 570 Merida Waterbury Turnpike. We are cutting the house out. We're going to leave that as is, and our new address for this site would be 580 Merida Waterbury Turnpike. It's an R40 zone. It's abutted by residential properties on Batchley Ave, Kiefer Lane to the west and south, and Hill Village to the east. And the topography generally slopes for the most part from the east to the west. We had a lot of conversation about the topography, and there was a detention basin here, and there's a gully that runs through the site that runs into property on Batchley Ave, and we'll get more into that as we move forward through the application. As I mentioned, Section 3-09.1 of your regulations encourage this type of application. We did meet with staff originally, and through the design process, we met with staff and some abutting property owners to try to get as many issues out there addressed as we possibly could during the design process. This gives you an idea, an aerial view of the site. You can see there's some open areas, some wooded areas, the existing home here that would be cut out, and our frontage on Merida Waterbury Turnpike would be proposed at this location. This property is not part of our site. Our proposal, as I mentioned before, is an ARC zone age-restricted development. We're going to be developing 7.6 acres of the property, the remaining parcel, not including the house, that would be known as 580. We're proposing 23 single-family units. Our original ARC zone presentation was for 24 units, but we did make a modification based on the design that we moved forward. Our original, the zone requires a 20% green space. We're able to achieve a 30% green space with this application. An additional green space above and beyond the dark areas are the 30, and then the yard areas would be the lighter greens and so on. If you remember the original application, we had two little islands, another one at this location. We had to modify that due to the design of the detention basin. That's something we'll get into as I move forward. We meet the regulations. The regulation requires 5 acres. We have 7.16. Permits 5 acres, 5 units per acre for a total of 38. We're proposing 23. Maximum building height with 32. We're approximately 30 feet with our maximum building heights. Maximum impervious coverage is allowed 50%. We're at about 28%. And 75 feet of frontage is what we're proposing. That's what's required. And then we have a minimum side yards, rear yards, and setbacks from adjacent units, 20 feet. All those things are being met per the regulation. And there's also an affordability part of this application. We have 3 units that would be deemed affordable, and Tony will talk a little bit about our affordability plan and what it took into consideration to move forward with that. Our biggest hurdle, I guess I would say, moving forward with this application really was storm water management, and I guess that's the elephant in the room, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And that was a lot of the discussion that came up during the zone change application. There is a detention basin located here in Hillcrest that discharges onto this piece. There's a large gully that runs through this piece onto this property here that is collected at a newly installed flared end that is then piped through this property over Batchley and then further to the west and discharges in that direction. There was improvements to this drainage system done by the town of Southington in the last few months. That has been a huge improvement for the property owners in that area. I think there's a little more work to be done, but I think for the most part, everyone's happy with what's happened up there. Our attempt in this design was to actually help alleviate that concern even further. We've had a lot of conversations with Ms. Hobson at this location, and her also a neighbor across the street who's a professional engineer, and was able to offer us some positive suggestions in our design. And we met with Jim Grappone and with the neighbor as well. So what we tried to do, we took the analysis of the Hillcrest subdivision, or development rather, it's not a subdivision, and we modeled their storms running through. There was also some modifications that were done to that system by town at the request of one of the downstream property owners. Again, that was something that was taken into consideration. And then we wanted to make sure that anything that comes down in this can be handled through this pipe system. That pipe system was a great improvement, but it could only handle up to a certain storm. And at that point, that system would start to fail. So what we've done is we've created a kind of a two-stage basin. We have a smaller, deeper area here, and then we have a much larger area that allows for those higher storms, those anything over 25, 50, 100-year storm gets backed up and slowed down in that basin. And it allows us to take those huge flows and then dissipate them slowly into that pipe system that has already been installed, that 24-inch pipe. So it's a much larger basin than you would typically see on a site like this, but it's a peace of mind for the applicant, for myself, for the owners downstream, to know that when this is completed, they will be protected, we will be protected, and we're pretty happy with how things worked out. Mr. Grappone has been integral to the process. He's been involved every step of the way, and I think we've come up with a design that is pretty solid. I'll look for a thumbs up from him later. So Zyro was probably the biggest hurdle with this application, and it took us a while to go through that process and analyze it in many different ways, and that's what took us the time to come back before this commission. But I'm happy to say that I think we got it. We did a good job. Some of the other design features we talked about, we have the walls at the entrance with the entrance sign. We have a pull-off for mailboxes. We have decorative lighting throughout the site, just light poles, street lights. Each property has a 2-car garage with a room for at least 2 cars in the driveway. We have visitor parking located here and located over here. There's a gazebo proposed over in this green space. This is a green low depression grass area that can be used for recreation, but during storm events, it will be allow for additional storage of stormwater. And the site is really designed with low impact development features, curbless roads, infiltration trenches. There's not a lot of catch basins. There's not a lot of pipe, and that allows for a lot of infiltration of water and runoff. And it's a better way to develop a site instead of just piping it and point discharging it. So we're kind of excited. We do this a lot in other towns, and we think that it's going to be well received here with this application. Pretty much the requirements that the ARC zone spells out, we've hit each one of them. I'm going to have Tony talk a little bit about the affordability plan, and I think one thing I wanted to mention was that we're just requesting that the record for the zone change be incorporated into the public hearing for this as well. So all the documents that we had submitted as part of that public hearing would be made part of this application as well, just as a support of our application, which is not an uncommon request. So,
Okay.
all right.
Thanks, Steve.
Hi, Tony DeNorfia, offices 133 Main Street, Southington. Hopefully I speak a little bit louder than Steve. Well, I got a couple of years on you anyway, so I think Steve kind of What he didn't do on stormwater, which I thought was a very interesting statistic, is that the existing stormwater system or piping that's installed now, the 24-inch pipe that the town did, under current conditions, it fails at a 25-year storm. What he didn't say is that the way that it's modified and by us doing the two-stage stormwater system with the backup, that 24-inch pipe now can handle the 100-year storm and will dissipate it slowly. I mean, you could see from the original slides that he was showing what the size of Hillcrest Basin is, and then with this type of design, what a huge improvement it is. Basically, I'd like to hit on a few points, and hopefully I'm not too repetition of Steve. But basically, the project consists of 23 units of active adult, 3 workforce, and 20 market. And that's pretty much consistent with the presentation we made at the Arch Zone hearing, except that at that time we're asking for 24, but with the design of the redesign of the retention basin and things, we lost the unit. The units will consist of 14 to 1,600 square feet, 2 to 3 bedrooms, all designed to be low or no maintenance. We'll do our typical construction that we do on our single-family homes. We'll all have custom cabinets. What's the matter? Okay. I want to show them? Okay. Yeah, we'll all have custom cabinets, granite quartz countertops, stainless steel appliances, hardwood and tile throughout. We're not big believers in carpet. And the exterior will be pretty maintenance-free. There would be vinyl and some masonry on the exterior. As far as the occupants of this type of development, per your regulations, at least one person has to be over 55 years old. Based upon our previous developments, as this will probably be an aging in place complex, which will mean that once someone moves in, they're not going to move out for a long time. And based upon our other developments, we found that eventually we'll probably have 40% or so of the homes will be occupied by one person. Bob, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm having a little trouble hearing you, even though you talk a little bit louder than Steve. But could you repeat again? It was my understanding that all the homes were 55 and older.
Yes.
And maybe I misunderstood what you said, that over a period of time they'll get there.
No.
Okay.
What I said was that over a period of time, we would expect that a lot of these households will become single-person households.
Okay, thank you.
And that by what we've seen in our other units, we have 60 or 70 right now. We find that a lot of the people age in place and that eventually they'll be occupied by one person.
Thank you.
Okay. Again, as Steve mentioned, as part of the regulation, 10% of the housing units have to be workforce housing. Now, to qualify under the regulations, that has to be 80% of the median income, which means for a family in a 3-bed unit, they could earn up to $93,683. And for a 2-bedroom unit, up to $81,072. So basically, that would cover a lot of town employees, school teachers, and people who everybody else that lives in the town of Southington. I don't think we make a heck of a lot more than that. The sales of the workforce housing right now, based upon the current formula, and I have to understand the formula changes over time. As the interest rate goes up, our prices that we're able to pay goes down, et cetera. But as of when we did the draft for the affordable plan, for a 3-bedroom unit would be $312,000. For the 2-bedroom unit would be $261,000, and that would compare to the market rate units which will be comparable to the ones, and they'd be in the $400,000 to $450,000 range. So as you can see, there's a significant incentive that the town is giving by giving us this type of housing, but it's also a significant incentive that we're giving back to the town. Now, as far as some of the items on Section 8, which governs the SPU, you know, it has that generic language that the development has to be consistent with the purpose of the regs. You look at health, safety, welfare, and property values. Now, basically, this is a residential use in a residential area, and the commission has already approved the arch zone here. So, you know, our feeling is that it's an appropriate use in this zone. In addition to that, it's a less intense development of the adjoining zones. Our development has one unit for roughly every 17,000 square feet. The Hillcrest is one unit for every 6 to 7,000. And on the easterly and, the westerly and the southerly boundary, those homes are in the 12,000 or 14,000 square feet. So as far as the development within the surrounding area, we are pretty consistent. There is something about property development, you know, that property values, that it can't depreciate property values. And that's always a tough one. I haven't been before this commission too much lately, but in the 40 years that I had been before the commission on a regular basis, I've never seen ever once one analysis that showed that a residential development would have a negative impact on another residential development. But we do have some empirical data that we can give you. What we did do is we looked at the Muirfield Estates development, which was built by Lovely Development. Basically, those homes, most of the homes were sold in 2021. And they sold for the market rates were approximately 374,000 or 425,000. The affordable was at 281 at the time. The average square footage price for the market rate was $269,000. For the affordable units, that came out at $195 a square foot. So what we did was, that's the data, and what we wanted to do was take some of the homes before and after. We looked at some homes that were constructed or sold in the immediate area in 2019, 20, and 21. We found 4. There were 4 that were sold, and they ranged in price from $409,000 to $615,000. Their average price per square foot was $178 a square foot. And then we went to what we could find in 2022, which just after the development, and we found 3 homes, 2 on Alpine Trail, which is something, it's a development that I built approximately 30 years ago. I'm glad it keeps with its property value. In South Fort Circle, those sold for an average of $230 a square foot. So there was a significant impact increase during that time. Of course, we had the COVID and all that type of stuff. But again, we couldn't see a correlation that gave any type of a negative value. I think Steve went over most of the site concerns and things, and as you know, we still have to go through the site plan process, so I'm not going to get into mentioning any of that. I thought that Steve was going to mention the traffic report, which we do have submitted. And by the way, all of the items that are listed on the website, are those all part of the record?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Well, in any event, there's the report from Scott Hesketh in there. And you know that your regulations provide that we have to maintain a level of service C. Well, Scott Hesketh did the analysis, and what he found was that during peak hours. It was level of service A for through traffic and B for the site traffic entering and exiting. Now, he did that analysis when we were still proposing 24 units. And he also did that analysis when he used the single-family trip generation, which is approximately it's approximately 40% more than the traffic that we will be generating from site. And as with most engineers, he used very conservative assumptions. In addition, your regs also provide that the plan should be compatible with the plan of conservation and development. Within your plan of conservation and development, which was adopted, I think 5 or 6 years ago now.
16, yep.
In addressing the future housing needs, it states housing for an aging population. Population projections indicate that Southington, like many other communities, shall experience a marked rise in the number of older residents in the future. Since housing needs can change as people get older for health, economic, or lifestyle reasons, having a range of housing options can help ensure that residents will always be able to live in Southington if they so choose. In addition, under the same section, it states under housing that is more affordable. Housing has a diverse range of housing at the present. Southington has a diverse range of housing at the present time, and this diversity shall continue to be encouraged in order to help address the housing needs of an aging population and provide housing choices for existing residents so they do not have to move elsewhere if their circumstances change. And we submit that those two items are very much on point based on the project and what we hope to accomplish. In addition to that, I know it's not required, but under the new housing plan that was recently adopted by this board, it states under types of housing needs in Southington, it says everybody wants or needs housing that is affordable. And it goes on further to say that older residents who may struggle to pay taxes and maintenance expenses on fixed income, but there may be not be an affordable and or appropriate option available to them. So we would submit that this provides a housing in place option plus, the affordable component to it. And those same concerns in the same language, which goes from the original plan of development through this, are again recited actually a couple of times within that plan of development, where it states again that we need aging in place, and we need housing that again people can afford and continue to live in. So I think I probably said enough because you probably heard enough from me. But anyways, we believe, that we have met or exceeded all the requirements of the regulations, and I hope the neighbors are here and appreciate what we did. We think that we went over and above and beyond. And if you have any questions at this point, be more than happy to.
Yeah, so is the presentation, Tony, is that all you guys have for now? I mean,
It's it for
I'll
now.
open it up for commission members, okay.
Yes.
So any questions from members of the commission on this application? Peter?
Yeah, so thank you. So Steve, if I could direct questions to you. So if you could put up the site plan, if you would. So I remember our conversations, I guess it was over the summer, Steve, when you were here?
I think it was before that, actually. Was it the spring?
It was a ways ago when we had our discussion, and I remember you saying, leave it better than you found it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think your efforts here looks like you're trying to do just that. And so that's certainly appreciated.
Thank you. We worked very hard on the drainage. We really
Yeah,
did.
because that was, as you said, Ms. Hobson and Mrs. Robinson have been, no other way to say it, suffering.
They've been suffering, but they've also been very graceful with us, and
Yeah.
and we've tried to keep them in the loop as we
Yeah.
went through this process.
You know, and the whole Blatchley neighborhood has, since Hillcrest,
Right.
really, if we're honest about it, with the water going like a river over there, literally across Blatchley Drive down the street.
Yep.
And so anything that can be done to fix that, this is one of those cases where if you just leave the land alone, the problem exists, but if you build something, there's the chance of it fixing. And so I think I remember those discussions when we were here, and the other discussion was when we were doing the Arch Zone, because the trade-off was, do we put 3,000 plus square foot houses with a 5,000 square foot footprint, as Mr. Donarfia said, with clear cut mindset, because
Right.
people want clear lawns, versus what we have now. And so that was kind of the trade-off that we had. And so with that, in regards to boundaries, Steve, so there's, the last time we talked a lot about the large trees that are in this neighborhood, and people, I remember public saying, okay, I know you got to build something, but do I have to see it? And so can you talk a little bit about those trees and the boundaries and what we're kind of doing there?
So you will see it. I mean,
You're building stuff, I
building
get it,
something,
but-
you'll see it. What we did is we maintained, the dark green is maintaining the existing vegetation
Okay.
around the property, and then the lighter green is infill areas. So part of, especially in this area, we have a decent amount of landscaping along on this property because we just need to do more work with the detention basin. But again, even the detention basin has landscaping around it. All these areas will be, the plan proposes to use existing vegetation as much as possible, but to infill with the additional plantings were required.
Yeah, because there's a lot, as I remember going over there's a lot of scrub type stuff that
Especially-
probably isn't helping. And so if you have
Especially
new
in
plantings,
this
be
area.
good. Yeah, because especially where Mrs. Robinson is and where all the water is in there's
Even
a lot
in-
of scrub stuff.
Even over in this area, there's some scrub over there. We met with one of the neighbors over there and just concerns about that. So that was the intent, but also to leave those darker and middle green areas. The basin will have to be maintained, but those areas will actually vegetate themselves as well. So they will fill back in as we move forward. They're not.
Okay.
The other thing that, as we talked about, the difference between this type of development and subdivision is that this type of development will get maintained the way we're proposing it right now. Instead of cutting into those buffers and clearing additional, it's going to look the way it is, the way you approve it. It's going to stay that way, and just fill in more, but you won't have additional clearing or anything like that.
Right. And as we talked before, I think there's an association that will
Correct.
be part of this, correct?
There will be association that maintains the grounds. It will maintain the detention basin, the storm drainage system. All those things will be maintained every 6 months is what the plan calls for the drainage system, detention basin, things like that. And obviously the grass and all those things get
Right.
maintained weekly throughout the site. But yes, it's more of a controlled element than single family homes.
Right. And so if God forbid something happens, there's people to talk to
Yes.
to get something done versus, as you said, if it was 10 or 12 private homes, you're kind of stuck.
Yeah, and I can tell you, looking at Hillcrest just up the hill, they're in the process of doing that now. They've actually reached out to us to talk about maintenance of their basins and inspections and things like that. So you can see it actually happening once the homeowners have taken over the association. They're actually initiating that, and they're doing that uphill, and we'll be continuing the same process here as we go
Interesting.
forward.
All right. Oh, thank you for that. That's good to know. I think your square footage is good. And I think that's more, like you said, in keeping with the surrounding
Areas.
versus if you put, big houses there, this kind of,
Yeah.
it sticks out. It doesn't do it. Any sidewalks or no?
We don't have any sidewalks proposed in interior. We have like a shelf off the road
Yeah.
that could be used for walking.
No room
There's
for like
no-
a trail or anything
no-
like that, walking trail or anything?
The trouble would be I think the topography with the grades.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, our effort was to try to maintain least amount of grading around the back of these units.
okay.
To not disturb any more land than we have to, and not take any more trees down. And then what happens with these are all walkouts. So these all drop in between each unit down 8 to 10 feet.
Gotcha.
So it's I think there'll be areas for passive recreation, the gazebo, the green spaces,
Yeah.
but we didn't necessarily think that a walk was necessary. And the traffic on this site will be a minimum, I believe.
Yeah, I'm not concerned about that. All right, I'm in anxious anticipation of engineering view on this, as are you. So with that, I'll yield. Thank you.
And we did receive, we did just submit some revised plans to Jim, so I don't know if he had time to look at
Okay.
those, but I'll let him, I'm not trying to put any pressure on Mr. Griffon at all.
I think,
Appreciate that.
I think some of it goes to the site plan application
Yeah,
part
agreed.
part of the process, so we're not quite there yet, but maybe tonight we'll get there, we'll see. So, any other questions from members of the commission?
I just have one, it's more of an informational question. Tony was mentioning about the need for affordable, if you will, and senior housing, 55 and older. And I noticed one of the letters that came into the commission that we read that I guess in summary, it basically said just the opposite, that we don't want a town of 75-year-old people. We want some young folks. But to speaking to that, just a question.
I agree with, I'm almost there.
Of the people that would move into this this development, if you will, how many of those, and again, it would be more of a guesstimate based on your experience, Tony, how many of those would be from Southington, which would then open up other housing that they'd be moving, let's say they're downsizing from something to something smaller into your development? Do you find that the majority of them would be from Southington downsizing or coming into Southington based on your experience?
Based on the experience plus on the number of calls we've gotten just because of the Record Journal article, I say yes, the majority will be Southington residents. It's something that's needed. I mean,
I'm not questioning that, that's for sure.
I just moved into a smaller house myself, because at a certain point, I'm like, when you have kids and they're growing up after 35 years, you turn around and say, I've had it. I don't want to maintain the 2-acre lawn and all that type of
You
stuff.
go into 5,000 square foot now, Tony?
Yeah, right. You got the wrong developer. I'm not that kind of guy. But anyway, so I can understand, but the idea is, it's not that you, in any type of housing plan, what you want is you want a very vibrant town. And in that vibrant town, you have to have a balanced mix. And that balanced mix has to be, you have to have for the single family development. I mean, up on our, believe it or not, on Loper Street, that single family development there, we're getting a substantial amount of, well, let me tell you, in 35 years living on Williamsburg Drive, I think we had a total of 15 kids that came for Halloween. Last night we had 70. But the idea is, when you get younger people, it just makes everything better. But you have to have some place for the generations to go. And what I found out in the development that I lived in and that brought our kids up in, is that we all aged together. I mean, most of us, we bought our homes, we stayed there. At a certain point in time, as we got around my age now, you're selling the house and moving into something else. And then it recycles. The person that bought my house has, a family. And actually, it was my son's best friend growing up. So, I mean, it just kind of recycles. But you need both. You need a vibrant town. And right now, if you had asked me 15 years ago when we were doing a development like this in Middletown, does Southington need it? And I did not realize, and I would have probably said no, but I did not realize the actual need that currently exists in town for this type of housing. I mean, you can see the two small ones that were developed so far, how quickly they went.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Any other questions? Caleb?
Right. Hey, I have a couple of questions, and these aren't site-related questions. This is the Archstone piece of it. So 23 units, correct? So the Archstone requires a minimum of 10% workforce-related housing. So we're short of that, right?
No, we're not.
We're not.
Actually,
10%.
excessive. 10% of 23 would be 2.3 units.
So we
They
have to
have
round
three.
up to 3.
We're rounding down.
No, we're rounding up.
Oh, there's 3.
3.
Oh,
3.
thank you.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
good job. Biologist, not a mathematician.
Is that it, Caleb? Is that it?
No, second one. You did mention, is there an association fees, like property management fees associated with this?
Yes, there will be. We did an estimate in the Andy, in the
Yes.
Association will be fees as every other one.
Yep. And so again, back to the workforce housing. So is that number for that fee schedule, is that included in?
it's included.
It is.
So it can be 30%. Again, Andy drafted it, but 30% of the housing cost. So that includes your association fees, your taxes, and utilities. We had to put a figure in for utilities also.
So we covered everything.
Everything.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you. Good job.
Wow.
Okay.
All set?
Yeah, I appreciate his answers.
Any other questions from members of the commission?
You did it for me.
Anything else? Anything to add before we open up to the public? No? All right. Prepare yourself. This is the portion of the public hearing where we allow the public, members of the public to come up to the podium and speak for or against it. And we'll start with anyone who would like to speak in favor of this application. Please come up to the podium. Yep, come on up. Just give us your name and your address for the record and just share your thoughts with us.
Kathy Brayfield, 47 Kiefer Road. I just have one question. On the map, I looked and it said there was a 25-foot setback. Is that to the green space line or is that to the property line?
Kathy, no, so what we'll do is if you have a question, you know, as I said in the sort of a meeting protocol or whatever, it comes here. We'll let everyone's going to get up who wants to talk. I'm gathering those questions up. We'll ask the applicant to answer those questions when they come back up.
Perfect. And then another thing, are these going to have basements? That was one other question. In case they get water.
The basements get water.
Yeah.
Well, I do. So,
Okay,
okay,
all right.
that's it.
Thanks, Kathy. Yep. Anyone else have anyone in favor? Again, we're still in favor. We'll get to those opposed, so come on up.
So, good evening, everyone. My name is Mary Ellen Hobson. I own and live at 113 Blatchley Avenue and have done so for nearly 30 years. I have a copy of my transcript for the scribe, if that helps. I see you're taking notes over there. My concerns with the development of the property at 570 Meriden Waterbury Road have always been around stormwater drainage, preservation of large hardwood trees, appropriate size buffer zones between the new properties and existing properties, and preservation of green space for the existing animal corridor. Attorneys D'Onofrio, Tony and Andy, and his colleagues Steve Giudice and associates at Harry Cole & Sons have worked exceptionally hard to accomplish Zyro and in fact exceed regulations around the proposed development by creating a grading and piping system and several detention ponds, including the largest one behind my house, 113, and those of my neighbors, 105, 95, 87, 77, 67, and 55, I think it is. The plan, as you saw, is to formalize a permanent easement across my property and the property of 105 Blatchley, that's Marie Robeson's property, in order to extend and connect a 24-inch outflow pipe from the largest detention pond to the existing 24-inch pipe in my backyard. Both Marie and I have had agreeable verbal discussions with Attorney D'Onofrio about the pipe easement and the location of the connecting pipe. We were provided with draft documents about this easement on October 27th. I sent questions about the easement to the D'Onofrios yesterday. Tony and I chatted on the phone today, so he could answer my question and revise the draft easement document. When I wrote these comments, I was awaiting receipt of that, but Andy sent me those via email this afternoon. I haven't had a chance to take a look at those. The D'Onofrios have been extremely considerate in preserving as many trees as possible on our properties during the pipe installation. I appreciate that. There have been discussions about an easement for the emergency swale that is planned for my south property line. Discussions included not removing any trees on my property to install the swale, perhaps moving and repairing if damaged, or replacing my existing shed to install the swale, and the need to determine who would maintain this swale in perpetuity, both on the 570 Meriden Waterbury Road property and on my property. I supported the swale conceptually. Again, I was provided with draft document about this potentially temporary swale easement on 1027. I also sent questions about the swale easement to the D'Onofrios yesterday. Again, Tony and I chatted on the phone today. He listened to my concerns and questions, and I received the revised document, which I haven't looked at, later this afternoon. It's up in the air at present whether this easement should be a temporary or permanent one. The concern here is if, God forbid, that large detention pond breaches or tops out and flows through and damages the emergency swale or spillway, like scouring or trenching or something like that, who would be responsible for fixing it on my Blatchley property? Moving on, the proposed buffer zones provide some green space. I'd always like to see more, but I think they've done a good job here. It appears that the D'Onofrios are trying to preserve old-growth hardwoods where possible. I have to put a pitch in for trees. There's two very large 75 to 100-year oaks behind the property, about 77 Blatchley Avenue, that house fruit bats and a large owl that I hope can be preserved and incorporated into the development. I'm not confident, but I'm hopeful that the green space will allow for safe animal traffic flow. See a lot of bears, coyotes, bobcats, and that kind of stuff. So here's my concerns, and some of them have been addressed, but what's the possibility that the detention pond on the Hillcrest property, just east of this property, could fail in a 100-year-plus storm and inundate the 570 Meriden Waterbury Road Highland Ridge system? I believe Steve designed it so that it would handle that, but it still was a concern. Would failure of the Hillcrest detention pond cause failure of the Highland system? Will the design of the emergency spillway handle any such breach to protect my property? What amount of water handled by the emergency spillway will affect Blatchley Avenue and downhill neighbors? If the detention ponds do break or top, what entity is responsible for any damages from such? I'm told that unlike the Hillcrest HOA, which responsibility will be turned over to the owners once construction is complete, that D'Onofrio Building and Development will control the Highland Ridge HOA and maintenance of the utilities and pond. That makes me feel a lot better. Once construction is complete and the Hillcrest builders hand off to the HOA of Hillcrest owners, will they be required to carry insurance for this situation? When my yard and basement were inundated in 2019, my homeowner's insurance did not cover cleanup because it does not cover groundwater issues. In the past, I was told that flood insurance at about $150 to $200 a month was available to me, but not very practical because it is only applicable in a setting like my neighborhood in Connecticut if FEMA declares a flood. I don't think FEMA will declare a flood on Blatchley Avenue. But in lieu of the potential impending detention pond close to my property, I inquired about flood insurance again. A claims representative from my insurer, Allstate, told me again that flood insurance was only applicable in a setting like my neighborhood if FEMA declares a flood. Flood insurance only covers inside the perimeter of my property anyway. If the detention pond breached, it would be the liability of the owner of the pond. So I'm kind of left in a quandary. I could purchase flood insurance that would likely do me no good if I got water from the east unless FEMA declares a flood. So my property being the lowest point is at most risk for flooding. After being flooded in 2018 and 19, when we had something like 300-year storms in 10 weeks, and then working hard with many folks, including the town council and Mark Sciotta, to get the situation remediated, I must admit I'm still very worried about potential stormwater issues if the detention ponds fail and the spillway is activated. I am aware that my property is, as the low point in the neighborhood, may still be vulnerable to flooding, even with the improvements that the D'Onofrios and Highland Ridge makes. The only way to clearly guarantee no flooding in my basement would be to close in my underhouse garage, rework the pitch of my yard, and fill in and construct a replacement garage. Any decision to do this obviously would likely best be made in the future. Thank you for your time and attention to this evening, and I'm happy to answer questions if anybody has any.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Any questions from members of the commission? Ms. Hobson? No? Okay, thank you
thank
very
you.
much. Thanks. Anyone else who'd like to speak in favor of the application? Anyone would like to speak in opposition to this application?
Yes, Larry DiPaolo, 106 Blatchley Avenue. I just want to go a little the town type direction. A few years ago, our town council decided that Southington was being overbuilt, over construction. So the town council put a referendum out, and the people of Southington had a vote. And the people of Southington voted to spend $5 million for the development rights of a golf course in Southington. All right. So if I understand you people make decisions, you make decisions, but I'm saying that decision to spend $5 million to cut our development down in town was I would think, a message to this board that Southington, we don't want extra development. I mean, we right now, just taking $5 million at 2%, the taxpayers of Southington are paying over $25,000 a month to buy those rights so that golf course is not developed. And it's only not even a half a mile from where we're developing this development. Okay? Now, it's an R40, if they want to go in and they got 8 acres and they could put in 6 or 7 houses, I have no problem with that. Whatever the zoning is, that's fine. But I just can't see, if the R40 says you could put 7 houses in and they want to put in 23, what benefit is that of Southington? All right, I'm sure, I don't have the facts, but I'll bet you there's a lot of houses open in Spring Lake Village that are for sale. I know of a couple, but I mean, there's housing. If people want it, it's there. But the fact, if they want to go in here and build 7 homes because it's an R40, you got to put the road, whatever, I have no problem with that any place in town. But to take, instead of 7 houses, put in 23, I don't see any benefit to the town of Southington. And the people already voted $5 million to the golf course not to be developed. And here we are half a mile away. We're putting in 21 houses instead of 7. So I don't see where this could even be. Should be. I think that the people of Southington have spoken, and they don't want to do what these people want to do. If they want to put in 7 houses, I wouldn't be here talking. It's an R40. Do what you got to do. And another thing with this long, I'm getting off of that part now. This water, this big, that's going up almost the whole length of Blatchley Avenue. There's only like 3 houses on Blatchley that's not going to have that water retention system behind their home. And we had a lot of problems. Mary Ellen, worst one of all, okay? And she got plummeted. But since the town did what they did, I don't believe she's had any problems. But now we got 7 acres of wooded natural land that absorbs water. Now we're going to put 23 houses. We're going to put roads in, driveways, all this stuff, which is not going to absorb the water. So there's going to be extra water coming down in addition to the retention pond up on Hillcrest. Now we got this other thing. And they say the 50-year storms. We've been having 50-year storms every year for the last 3-4 years. And that's a fact. So, I mean, this water is going to be behind half of the whole side of Blatchley Avenue is going to have this water behind them all the time. It's going to be sitting there. And then when we get the big storm, it's going to be even worse because there's no place for that water to go now. We just put 23 houses. We put roads in, driveways in. The water can't go into the land. That's more water coming down to Mary Ellen's house. So I don't see where this is good for Southington. It's good for Blatchley Avenue. It's not good for anybody. I think the people have spoken. They don't want to develop the town of Southington. And I mean, I think that you got to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Larry, could I just offer some clarifications?
Yep.
This is not an R40. Several months ago, an application came into this commission to convert this over to an ARCH zone. ARCH is age-restricted cluster housing zone. That's what it stands for. ARCHZ, right? The trade-off on it, and it's guided by section 3.09 of our regulations, which are adopted by this commission, right? The trade-off for an ARCH zone, when we adopted that provision, that regulation several years ago, was that we allow for greater density, but the trade-off for a couple. One is that there's a requirement on the set aside for open space, land that's not going to be developed on that property. And secondly, there's a requirement that they provide at least 10% of workforce housing, affordable housing. If they meet those requirements, if this application meets those requirements, just like if it was an R40 and they came in and met the requirements under R40 or anywhere else, then we have an obligation legally to allow that to happen. So I just want to make sure that you understand. Secondly, the development rights that you speak of with the Southington Country Club that occurred 2 years ago, I think, they had approval. The country club had approval there. The Calvinese family had approval there to put a number of units. I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 150, maybe 200 units there.
Yeah.
And what we as a town, the town council actually drove this, and I supported it, right? What we decided to do was to approach them and to say, could we buy the development rights so that you don't put those units there and thereby burden our infrastructure and services in town? The town council agreed to that. Because of the price tag, it had to go out to referendum. It was voted on in referendum, which you referred to, right? I think it was like 75%, maybe
It was
80%.
overwhelmed.
It was a large majority. is
because
where I'm
people
going,
are tired of the development.
That issue, though, however, isn't a statement about whether we should or should not develop. If you own a piece of property, you have the right to develop it so long as you do so within the guidelines of what our or restrictions of what our regulations are.
Correct.
We change the regulations occasionally, right? But ultimately, that's our guiding document.
Okay.
And if they meet the requirements under ARCH zone, which is what this again is designated, this area is designated as, then we have an obligation to approve that. We can make modifications. We can suggest, hey, there's a drainage issue there or there's not. The last thing I'll say with regards to your statement, and I appreciate it, right? That the statement that the detention pond is going to be sitting up against a bunch of backyards on Blanchie. I live on Hobart Street, 358 Hobart Street, right up the street here. It's about a half mile up the street. My neighbor's house in my backyard has a slope that resulted in drainage coming into my yard and wiping my backyard away. If you've listened to me over the last 3 years, you've heard the story, right? I had to put in a $30,000 curtain drain and landscaping modifications in order to keep and maintain a backyard. Because otherwise I had my family, we joked around, we called it Lake Hammersley, because we had whenever it rained, any significant amount, we would have a pond that was created in our backyard that would sit there until it dried out, day, 2, maybe 3, depending on the amount of rain. So I hear what you're saying there, right? And I am personally very sensitive to stuff like that. I think that what you would find, and this is really an engineering thing, and we'll have the applicant come up and talk about it. I think that what you would find, because of what they're doing there, is that actually the water flowing into the properties right now will be decreased because it's going to be gathering there and then flowing through a system away from those properties all along it's the west side.
That's already been corrected. The town come in and put a big pipe through Mary Ellen's yard, and that's not a problem anymore, I believe. That's gone away, that problem. Now we're creating another problem by what we're doing. It's fixed. They even put a bigger pipe this summer across the road because they had like I'm making up numbers now, 30-inch going into 20-inch. Now it's equal, it's gone. I don't believe Mary Ellen has a problem since they've done all this work. But two things, what you just said was you had to spend $30,000 to fix your yard.
Yep.
So that's the answer to Mary Ellen. She's wondering if the problem comes up and exists, she's got to do it herself. You had to do it, she'll have to do it.
And I'm not going to speak for Mary Ellen.
No,
It's
I'm
something
just
that she has to deal with on a regular
Right, but
basis.
I
I think
mean,
that she just testified that she thought that the improvements that they're proposing here actually are going to make her situation better, not worse.
Right, but it could, if it goes the other way, you were responsible for the fixing your property, that's all I'll say. And another thing, you said there's two things in that, give them this permission to do this. And one of them was open space. So I can go up there and use the open space in the pavilion and all, that's open to the public. I don't think so. It's gonna be a closed private road. So where does the open space come in?
Open space does not mean necessarily that it's public accessible open space all the times. So, for example, when we bought the development rights at the country club, we bought the development rights. Doesn't mean that it's open space that you can just go walking on the
No,
on the golf
I agree
course.
with that, but I'm saying open space is something that we, the town, own.
Open space means not, space that's not developed and set aside is not going to be developed.
Okay, so
Use a simplistic
so
definition
a
of it.
developer could have wetlands and they say, that's my open space, and then that goes.
That may qualify by,
So-
hold on a second, by town or state or federal definition as open space, yes. We can't really do anything about that.
So
That's
these retention ponds could be open space.
good, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can I,
Go ahead, Peter.
just one other thing, Mr. DePaolo. Just one other thing that you said. It's a good thing we have this conversation because we get it a lot. And just for clarification, the Planning and Zoning Commission can only consider that application before it. No other decision or anything else can we ever consider. Ever. So any decision in town has no bearing on the application that gets before us. For example, I'll get housing out of it. Let's say somebody wanted to, we had 1,000 burger restaurants in town, and somebody wanted to build 1,001st, and there was zoned commercial. We cannot say, it would be illegal for us to say, you can't do that. It's your property.
I agree.
So whatever decision was made elsewhere, golf course, whatever, can never have any bearing on this. If someone is within regulations, to echo what the chairman said, that's that. So decisions made elsewhere or whatever happens elsewhere, we can never consider. And a lot of time it may go against what we may want to do, but that can't be done legally. So we can't consider what has happened elsewhere. It'd be illegal for us to do. It's called bias and predetermination. And so we can't consider other decisions.
Right, but
I understand your feeling, and as a public citizen, you can certainly say that.
now, to go back to that, is we, the people of Southington, elect you people to represent us because we can't be here every
Sure.
week. And we appreciate what you do. But when the people come out and make a statement as to we're being overdeveloped,
Yep.
I would think you got to take that into consideration.
Yeah, if it's not in the regulations, we can't. It'd be illegal for us to do that. If it was within regulations, we have to go for what the regulations are. That's the law.
So
We could change regulations, in which case we would have a, public hearing on that or whatever. But if someone is within the rules, that's it,
so
by law.
We're more of an adjudicating body than like the town council or the board of ed.
Right.
Or the board of finance. We have parameters, our regulations guide us on what we can and cannot do. If someone meets the regulations, we're obligated to approve it. And if we don't approve it and they meet the regulations, play it out for a second, what's going to happen, they're going to hire an attorney, they're going to go to court, they're going to sue the town's going to spend money to adjudicate an issue that we have no basis for making a decision if that's what our basis of the decision is at.
Yeah.
We just don't want to develop property.
Right. People think our
That's gonna
decisions are
get-
discretionary. They are not.
Okay, one more question. we just put Hillcrest in, okay? So there was 100 and X property. We got another street, like there's 5 entrances onto Meriden Waterbury Road. Has anybody looked into the fact that our sewer department and our water department is going to be able to handle these situations?
So as part of our process, we have our applications go out to the water department, fire department,
Okay.
a variety of different entities, might go to wetlands, conservation commission, all these things, and it all percolates up here, and we make the decision based on the reports that we get. I'm not sure about this one specifically, but
But yeah,
there are, your fire department, water department, have both weighed in with their
So sewer
positions on
department,
this.
sewer department also?
well, engineering. That's engineering.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, we have a whole host of reports that are up here that are provided by the applicant or by town bodies.
'cause
But-
Well, we won't
Feed into
hear
our
it unless they do.
I mean, we're talking like, in the last 4 or 5 years, we're talking like, could be 150 people or 150 homes enter into the sewer system now that weren't there before, and there's going to be a problem. All right, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your conversation. It's always good to have those back and forth.
Educational.
Yeah. Anyone else who'd like to speak in opposition to this application? Anyone who just wants to come up and talk on the application, either for or against it? No? Nobody? Steve, Tony? We have a couple of questions that were raised. You want me to go through them, or you write them out, Steve?
I'm going to hit the ones I can answer, and then I'll have
You go
Tony
ahead.
get up and
See if there's anything that you didn't pick up that I.
there was a first question about the 25-foot setback. There's a requirement of a 25-foot setback minimum from the property lines to any structures on the site. And then there's a minimum separation from unit to unit of 20 feet. So most of these units are much more than 25 feet. I think one unit here is about 25 feet from the property line. This corner of this unit is 25 feet from the property line. But the rest of them are all outside, much further away from the property lines than 25-foot setback. As far as Ms. Hobson talked about the trees, one of the things we did, we went out and surveyed a bunch of trees on her property to try to work around as many trees, and we'll continue that effort as we move forward. Hillcrest pond failure is one of the things that we had to take into consideration, not only for Ms. Hobson, but for our development as well, because if Hillcrest were to fail for some reason, they would affect our site. So we did take that in consideration, and if that pond were to fail and it would come over the emergency spillway, we have mechanisms on our site to direct the water into our system, or if over our system. If our system gets clogged or something, it would run into our detention basin over the land. And then the detention basin again is designed to use just the pipes for 100-year storm. If that were to fail, then we did identify a swale that we again went over with Ms. Hobson that would go along the edge of her property line in this location, that would direct water down to Batchley. And then I think we met with the abutting owner to the south on Batchley about some additional modifications that the town would probably make just to ensure that if catastrophic failure happened, it would stay in these channels, in these swales, and go into the wetlands downstream. And Jim can talk a little bit about that. I will put him on the spot on that one, because he did agree to make some minor modifications to the grades over there, just to be extra safe. I think everyone involved has been extremely cautious in trying to vet out every possibility in our design, and these are things that we did take into consideration. From a maintenance standpoint, our detention basin will be maintained by our association as Hillcrest is maintaining theirs. I think that Tony is still talking to Mary Ellen about the swale, and part of the pipe we will maintain. I think part of the pipe is either the town of Southington's or Mary Ellen's. I'm not sure, but they're working those details out. One of the things about detention basins I think that gets missed is that they're not designed to store water for long periods of time. They really are designed to discharge the storm events within 24 hours. So, and the idea is that if we don't discharge the storm, when the next storm comes, there isn't the capacity. So the idea is that these basins may have a little wet bottom, and that's done for stormwater quality. But generally, the volumetric capacity of that basin should discharge out within 24 hours of the storm event to allow storage of the next storm event. So these basins, a lot of times I think there's a confusion about how they operate and the way they're designed. And your regulations have specific things that we have to meet in order to meet these requirements, but discharging it out is something that we design it to do. Yes.
No, wait, go ahead. Are you done?
One of the comments was just about the problem has been fixed, and in our review, the problem has been fixed to a certain point. And our concern, as we've designed and gone through this, is that at some point, if left alone, Marianne will have additional problems in the future. So our design was to eliminate that possibility of those future higher storm events causing problems for her. So although the town needs some great improvements out there, we think there's more improvements that will help the abutting property owners in the future. The other thing, open space, I think the misconception with open space is that we have an open space committee that goes out and buys open space for the town to use. But planning and zoning has open space that has a different, I guess, what's the word?
Context.
A different context. Open space can be preservation. Open space can be recreation. It can be fee simple land. It can be easements. There's a lot of different ways. This regulation asks for green space. It specifically says we want to have 20% green space. So that green space, we tried to do a perimeter around that wouldn't get cut. And then areas that are secondary green spaces, that won't be used on a regular basis, won't be mowed regularly. And then we have, of course, we have our regular green space. We're going to have lawns and stuff that and passive recreation areas around the property. So I think it's just difficult sometimes to follow the open space and what constitutes open space and how it fits into our applications. From a sewer and water perspective, I don't want to put Jim on the spot, but I think Jim's our sewer guy. So he kind of looks at it from a sewer perspective, and the water department has reviewed this and did approve it, I believe, last Thursday night. So they have reviewed this application. I think that covers the things that I can address.
There was one other question Miss Brayfield raised about basements. Are there basements in these?
Oh, there are basements proposed. We're proposing foundation drains around each basement that will discharge to daylight. So we don't anticipate. I like to say there's no guarantee of a dry basement, but everyone else wants a guarantee. So what can I tell you? We always propose foundation drains and waterproofing around our basements. So.
Okay. Steve, stay up there for a second.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Kayla had a question.
I'll wait for a site plan. It's probably a more appropriate place to ask the question.
Okay. Before you leave, Jim, are you okay to just talk about what types of conversations you've had with the applicant, just to put it on the record and what the outcome of those conversations have been?
Sure. I'd like to thank the Steve Judas and his team, Mr. D'Onofrio, for all the time they have put in addressing and exceeding, in my opinion, the town's regulation. I just want to go over the regs as they currently are, and this is what the design professionals have to design by. For detention basins shall be designed to reduce the peak rate of discharge from the 2, 10, 25-year storm to be a level commensurate with the peak rate of development and shall be able to store the 25-year storm event. So that's the current wording in the town regulations. So Mr. Judas and his team, with every effort meeting with the residents, has really stored up to the 100-year storm event. We just received revisions today, including responses to comments. They're still under review. However, just in concept, what I've seen is an exceedance of the regulation. Our normal town drainage is capable of handling a 10-year storm event. So this is what we actually designed for. There's not many towns that design for 100-year storm events. It's the nature of the beast, as it says. we're getting, 100-year storms more frequently. They're supposed to be every 100 years, but they're not every 100 years. They're almost an annual event. So they're under review. One of my comments was also to house the soils in that area. They've done, I think, 3 or 4 test pits in the area of the detention basins. There's 3. They haven't done percolation tests, but the deep pits have come back suitable for on-site septic and for draining. So in my opinion, it'll drain as Mr. Judas has indicated and in his testimony. So again, just to recap, it's under review. I have not finally signed off on the drainage, but I'm very confident that they've more than exceeded what is called for in the regulation.
And you found that the dialogue between you and the applicant to be a positive dialogue, that they've been willing to accommodate your suggestions
Yep.
without much delay or pushback.
Yeah, that's correct. And originally, I think the drainage calculations did not take a fully into consideration 100-year coming from Hillcrest, but it certainly does now. There's over 66, I think, CFS coming off-site that they've accommodated into their design. So up to 100-year, they actually looked at it for the lower orifice actually being blocked. So there's that taken into consideration. So, and belt and suspenders is, if it does ever overtop, there's an emergency spillway that's going to be constructed on Mills property. So I think the safeguards are there, but, it's still under review.
Any other questions for members of the commission? Steve, anything else to add?
Just thank you for your time tonight.
Okay. What's the sense on keeping this public hearing open? I'm not sure that there's anything else to really add here. Does anyone have an objection to closing the public hearing at this time? We all good? All right, we'll close the public hearing on this one, and we'll move on to item 8B. Peter D. Cemente, petition to change a zoning district boundary from an I-1 to a B-zone. Prior district boundary petition to change a portion of this parcel from an I-1 to a B-zone was approved with a modification on 9/15/2020, zone change 566. Property located at 1608 Merritt Waterbury Turnpike, zone change 575. Seb.
Try to escape out of it first. There you go.
Still on the old one, Seb. Caleb.
Our IT administrator.
Do the best.
Of course, there we go.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commission members. Seth Bovino, planner with Kratzer Jones and Associates, represent the applicant, Peter DiClemente. For orientation purpose, the map on the screen, Merritt Turnpike is at the top of the drawing here. North is in that direction. Clark Street is to the west. The property is located at 1608 Merritt Waterbury Road at the intersection with Clark Street. It is served by public water and sewer. The total land area is 1.37 acres, occupied by multiple buildings in very poor conditions. The property is bounded east and south by industrial zone I-1 north and west by business zone. On September 15, 2020, this commission approved the zone change from industrial to business, leaving at the request of the then applicant, leaving the southeast corner of the property highlighted in yellow here, still industrial zone. The green was zoned to business. The remaining area is about a half acre. The idea at the time was to retain the existing block building that's there and retain the industrial use for that building. And that effort did not succeed. The buyer backed out, so the property went back on the market, and Mr. DiClemente purchased the property recently. The current applicant, Mr. DiClemente, is asking that the commission rezone that a half-acre portion of the property in the southeast corner to business, which brings the zone line to the property line, which is the way it should be. Leaving that portion industrial does not work for the current buyer. He doesn't foresee being able to use that property partially business, partially industrial. Whatever he can do there, he needs to have the entire property available for development. The applicant submitted the area map with the names and parcels within 500 feet of the property. Notifications were mailed to the owners. A notification proof was provided in the record to staff. The health department and fire department provided a positive response to this application. We believe that rezoning that property is not going to be injurious to the neighborhood or the property owners surrounding this property. It's not going to prevent them to develop their property. If you have any questions at this time, myself or the applicant, we can answer your questions.
Any questions for the applicant? Caleb?
Hi. So I guess my biggest question is if the applicant is asking to change this from an I zone, which we very much high and hold standard here, what are we looking at doing there? Is there any proposed use of the space to change it to?
The owner has been contacted by various individuals looking at retail, potentially retail/office space.
So the last proposal, correct me if I'm wrong to my colleagues, but I believe it was supposed to be a gas station that was going to go into that space. Is that still the current plan?
No, there's no gas station in the plans.
So okay. So
Yeah, but you're talking to the microphone when you're talking, you're looking at him and not talking at the mic.
It's about 2 inches away. No, the plan is not to have a gas station there.
So it is, well, I know this isn't a site plan, and I'm not asking, I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole. I think those are my questions for now. I maybe circle back to me, but thank you.
Yeah, the previous applicant had that concept. It was a gas station, I believe, with a convenience store. The current applicant does not have that possibility to do that.
If I can just indulge one more time then. So we changed from an I to a business zone because the applicant had a plan to do something. Now he didn't do it. We lost the I zone and we don't have either. We don't have the business and we don't have the I zone anymore.
Well, you have a business parcel of land that can be developed for other than a gas station.
Right.
Yeah, and the individual that invested quite a bit of money into this is not going to keep it vacant.
I can imagine.
He's looking to knock down all those buildings and create something new and attractive there. And actually, he owns multiple properties along Clark Street to the south, to southeast, southwest of this property. And he did a very good job. He built multiple buildings there.
Can you give us an example of what those buildings were?
They're just south of the Mandarin restaurant. There's 2 buildings there. A house. One of the buildings is occupied by his company, which is an electric contracting company, and the other building is just south of that.
Okay. Thank you, Seth.
Yep. Peter, go ahead.
Seb, my memory's fading, but I'll channel Commissioner Volpe. Wasn't there something historical on this property? A garage or something that was old, or a Quonset hut or something?
There is an existing building right here. I believe that's the building,
There, okay.
fronting on Meriden Warbury Turnpike. It's in the middle of two of those old rusted Quonset huts.
Yes,
That one is made out of stone,
right.
has
That's
the
what it
stone
was.
face to it. And I believe Miss Volpe considered that historical.
Correct.
I don't know if it's an historic structure in terms of being registered or anything, but she considered it historic because it's old.
Right.
We will not be able to keep that structure. The curb cut needs to be as far away as from the intersection as possible. So the curb cut is going to be right there where the structure is. The state will not approve a curb cut that's near or right almost at the light.
All right.
We need to be as far east as possible.
Okay.
And so that's what's going to happen.
Okay. Now, I remember when this came in originally, and I had reservations about this, as I recall, changing anything I to B, because I said, once you start to do that, the dominoes fall, and we got another domino falling here. So if I go up Clark Street, which would be at the bottom of this page, that's industrial there, is it not?
Yes.
That's industrial, yes.
And to the right, that's business,
To the right,
right of this property.
oh, to the right, this is industrial.
Industrial, but if I'm on Merrill-Waterbury Road, to the right of the green, that's business?
That's industrial.
That's
We
industrial
just- we
too.
just did the storage warehouses there.
That's the story, and that's zoned industrial.
Yes,
So that's not zoned business.
that's not zone business. The storage warehouses are not allowed in the B zone.
So that's industrial, but it's not a factory, it's a storage thing. Got it. And so, changing, I always am hesitant to give up I space, particularly it's connected to other I space. So I get it, but I don't know how I feel about this, but thank you for the clarification, Seth.
The difference here is that this is not a separate piece of property with frontage on either
Yeah.
Meriden Woodbury Road or Clark Street. This is just a line that was created
Yeah.
by the request, generated from a request from an individual that was fitting his kind of a development.
Right.
And the commission tried to work with him and generated a line. They should not be there. The line usually goes along
It
the
kinda
boundary.
goes through.
Does
So-
not go across.
So unless the storage folks want to buy it and add on, or the people on Clark Street want it, it's a landlocked piece of property,
It is.
right?
It's together with the rest of the property.
Got it. All right.
That's the problem. And the storage people, we did the work for them. They're not interested in this. They did what they did. They moved
Okay.
on.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep. Any other questions for members of the commission? Let me try. So that carve out of keeping the I-1 on that parcel, that was a compromise that was reached with this commission, adopted unanimously on September 15th of 2020, a little over 2 years ago. And the deal was, because we were hesitant to give up the I land, was we're only going to take what we need for this development, and the rest of it we'll keep as an I zone. And that's what the commission asked for the previous applicant. That's what we gave, right? Is that your recollection of what happened?
Yes, I remember. And the difference is we have a different owner and different approach to the development of the property. And that's why we're before you. Because now, as a B zone, it doesn't make sense to have that separate piece there. Infringing on
Or
the-
Sev, the argument could be made that it doesn't make sense to have the B zone there, which is an argument that could have been made, and I think some people made, including myself, 2 years ago, when, I don't know if you were part of that application, when the application came before us to change it to a B zone, right? So now you're 2 years later, and you're trying to say, well, it doesn't make any sense. Well, again, 2 years ago, it didn't make any sense to make it a B zone, but we did it to accommodate the application after some conversation and some compromise, part of which was to keep that piece of the parcel as an I zone.
Yeah, I was not part of the application, but I was at the meeting, and I know the history of the application. I agree with you, that's what happened. The thing is, it is industrial, it is B zone now, and unless we go back and rezone it industrial, we have a B zone with a line that, from a business standpoint, overall development, which will be more efficient, it'll be a better development. To leave that line and leave that space there as industrial, it will infringe on the development of this. That was a unique situation where they had a gas station, and they were trying to keep this building to have income. They wanted to have income from this building, hopefully to support the rest. They couldn't even go forward with the development they had, and that's why they backed out. Even with that idea, it did not work.
But again, I go back and I say, I for one have been very adamant about not giving up our industrial land. I'm happy to go into reasons why. It doesn't really matter right now, but I've been reluctant to do that. And only under certain circumstances am I willing to even entertain the idea. And under the original application on this parcel of land, the conversation was, as I suggested it was, that this was a trade-off, that we keep that piece as an I zone. But I'll use the word I'm struggling with, and I'm trying to come to grips with my own self to say, well, just over 2 years later, you come in and say, give me a hamburger and I'll gladly pay you for it tomorrow. And then we make this a B zone, let's just say, play it out for a second. And then you're saying, well, hey, that next parcel of land really shouldn't be an I zone. It doesn't make any sense because everything else is a B zone there, right? I mean, you go to where the storage facility is, 10 years from now, the storage facility is not there, it's going away. And you go down the line of Meriden Waterbury Turnpike and you say, well, that's the only piece of I zone that faces Meriden Waterbury Turnpike. So let's just make it a B zone. That's the kind of logic that you're asking me to understand. I don't.
No, I'm not asking you for that logic. I'm just asking you not to mix the two. We're here with the existing situation, and we're trying to utilize the property at the best possible way. We feel that rezoning that portion is going to make a better development. If we leave it like that, it's not going to be as good of a development. It is an extension of the current zone. You're correct. It is one of the reasons to ask for a rezoning is if there's an existing zone next to you that's business, you can request to expand the zone. And the north and west, it's all business. And only the small portion to the east here, the storage facility, which was owned by the Calvanese family at one time, that's industrial. After that, it's business again. And then to the south, right here, we have industrial, and then goes into Cheshire, which we have that multifamily elderly housing over 55 community. So
Not in that part of Cheshire. Not in that part of Cheshire. That
that's
part of
in
Cheshire-
Southington. The development is in Southington, the
Okay.
over 55, but then you
Right.
get into Cheshire.
Right, the Rivercrest, is that what
Yeah.
you're talking about? Okay.
Yeah.
Right, in the back, it's sort of in the backyard there.
It's about 30 acres, 98 units. We did that, so we're familiar with the area.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions for members of the commission? All right, let's open it up to members of the
The
public.
applicant is here. Maybe he wants to add anything.
Yeah, well, sure.
If you have any questions for him, that may be appropriate for him to answer.
Got it, Seb, okay, thank you. Again, if you could start with your name and your address, please.
Peter D. Clementi, my business address, 298 Clark Street. So when we purchased the property, well, prior to us purchasing the property, I mean, obviously, I think to everybody in town, that's an eyesore, a total eyesore. And knowing that's industrial and what was on there, and again, you tell me industrial means outside storage. There was cars there, there's trailers there. I I would not think anybody that lives or does business in that area wants that to be seen or in that spot. I'm not quite sure that, I was just trying to look up at the property to the south. I'm not sure if that's total industrial because there's a residential house that's connected with that guy that he's doing rigging and stuff like that there. So I'm not sure what that zone is, and maybe you guys will know better.
The I-1.
Is that one with a
me show you.
residential house?
You want to, here, it's right there.
Okay.
So this is the piece of property you're talking about right there, if you could see it. And anything in pink is all industrial. That's all I-1 zone. The purple is business zone.
Okay.
So you can see your parcel is split, right? Just as the
Yeah,
map
yep.
shows.
Sure. Well, point being, no, when I bought it, that's a B zone. And now we're looking at what we can bring to that corner and everything that we're talking about and people that we're talking to or people talking to us. We kind of need that to go to a B zone and make it happen. But, and again, our thought for the property, our vision for the property, I would have thought that it would be a good thing for Southington. It'd be a good thing for the area. For us to take that B and go industrial, again, I know you were saying your vision is industrial. What is the town's vision of that corner? Do you want industrial on that corner with?
So the town established the zoning map, right? And just for clarification, right? So all this land here, all around here, including this right now, all of this is all industrial. It's all industrially zoned. All around here and across the street, down Clark Street, all the way to the Southington line. Is that south, I think?
Yeah.
That all of that is all industrial. So the town adopted the zoning map. They designated this area, all of it originally, including this green part here originally, was designated as industrial zoned, right? So we have a vision that says, okay, this is what we're doing. In addition, if you go further down Meriden Waterbury Turnpike, on this side, on Canal Street, that's all industrial as well. All the way up, I think, up to, that's where F&F Concrete is up by the Plantsville Center. So if you go up there, that's all industrial as well. So that was a designation. And the reason that industrial is valuable land is because there's a very significant amount of tax return on industrial land that you don't get in any other zone. So the town is able to tax machinery, property, basically the inside of the buildings on any industrial development. And you can't do that on every other development.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to clarify, the Manor Inn across the street, that's a B zone,
Yep,
and it's right pretty much just south of this tip over here. The Manor Inn owns the property and extends west all the way to the old Milldale Plaza. That's all B zone, and it continues on the other side of the rail to trail. On the north side, you have business in this corner, and over here going east and going west up to where the rail to trail is. There's a couple acres of industrial zone. There's an existing building that was renovated, and it's a mixed use at that location, then becomes industrial. So it's a mixed use all over the place.
you're right. It's like a jigsaw puzzle a little bit. And it's, again, this parcel, this part on just to the west there, or to the east there, this parcel right here, and the parcel up between Mastriani, which is a street that runs adjacent or parallel to the canal, right? And canal, that sliver of land sort of fans out as industrial land all the way up to the center of Plantsville, essentially.
There's industrial.
But everything else, you're right, Seb, is everything else around there, all the way down Meriden Waterbury Turnpike on both sides, except for this area, right, is zoned as business.
Yeah, except by the rail to trail on the east side, there's that one industrial parcel there. After that, right where the old garage used to be, that's business and extends north by the post office and all that area there. So it's a combination. So the question is, we believe that corner can be dressed up and built very nicely with B uses versus industrial, because you're not going to have a factory going there. What we're going to end up doing then will be additional storage facilities extending into this area. That's an option that we can do. It's a storage facility, they pay well, it's a good return on your money, but they're not attractive as much as what you can do with a B zone.
I voted against the storage facility, so. That was a long time ago, though.
Yeah.
Okay, again, Peter, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm just trying to have a dialogue with you about, you asked a question of what the town vision is, and that's how that became industrial zoned. And it's been industrial zoned until 2 years ago, when we changed this parcel of land to a business zone, because an applicant came in asking us to change it. They wanted the entire parcel changed to a business zone originally, and we compromised with them and said, keep this piece as industrial, which you're now trying to convert to the business zone. That's sort of a brief history on it, yeah.
Three of the sides on that corner are.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Anything else to add, Peter? Before I open it up to members of the public to, no? You all set? Okay. Any questions of the applicant from members of the commission? Anyone? No? Okay. Thanks, Peter. Anyone in the public like to speak for or against this application, please come up. Yep. Come on up. Give us your name and address. Share your thoughts.
Good evening, George Kastner III, 237 Clark Street, just off the map there. I am all for this. That area is a real bad eyesore. There's not a lot going on the Meriden Waterbury Turnpike. If you live in that area, you have a few options. Go get drunk at a bar, or go down and get McDonald's. I think some sort of business. I know they were saying maybe retail. The only retail store near there is a Dollar General. Closest place to get anything, Target maybe, Walmart, Queen Street. There's really not a lot there. I think it can help. There's a lot of residential houses further down Clark Street, and unless you cut through Plantsville and then jump onto West Street to get to Target, there's not a lot going on at that town for us over there. So I think that being a business could be very beneficial.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, George. Any questions of George, members of the commission? No? Okay, thank you. Yep, come on up.
My name is Tony D'Angelo. I live at 46 Brookview Place, which is part of Rivercrest. So I live that corner every single day of my life. And right now, I don't know if legally it is, but we at Rivercrest call that a blighted area. It is a horrendous corner. It is ugly. The buildings are falling apart. And it's just a horrible situation there. To keep that little piece industrial, I think, would be a crime for that corner. The gentleman who purchased the property, he did some work behind the Manor Inn, and he did a tremendous job. Go look at it. The electrical, it's a wonderful place. I mean, it's clean, it's neat, and he cleaned it up. And I'm sure we are thrilled that he has plans to do something with this. So to keep that little corner industrial probably would not work with what he wants to do, and thus would keep that corner a blighted area and an ugly area. So you're not getting taxes out of it now, and maybe you wouldn't get as much taxes as you would industrial, but you'll get more taxes with a business there than what that place is now. So I applaud the gentleman who purchased it, and I really look forward to him doing something there. It sounds like, based on his past performance and his history in town, it looks like he's going to nicely. So The only thing that we would ask, because we worked with other areas, we've worked with Cheshire as they're building all of those units behind us at Rivercrest. They were very transparent. They worked with us and all of that. So I would just hope the gentleman would, take that same manner and work with the people, the landowners around him. But at least he's going to clean it up, and we're looking forward to seeing what it's going to be. And we're looking forward to working with him. But please, what we have now is just a blighted area. So I definitely am in favor of this, and this is the best that I think we can do for that corner. Thank you.
Tony, can I ask you a couple questions?
Certainly.
Would you be in favor of that corner becoming a laundromat?
I'd have to see the building.
Well, under our zoning regulations, laundromats are allowed in business zones.
I'd have to see it.
So as Peter said earlier, that if someone comes in with a laundromat proposal in a business zone,
Yep.
and it meets our regulations,
We have
don't get to really
we have
talk about what it looks
storage.
like.
I know that's industrial, but I'd have to see it. We're open to anything, because right now that corner is horrendous. So a large portion of that property is business now. So, and you have a little corner that's industrial. It's either keep it like that, and then they could still put a laundromat in that business area, and it would be very small. And then that industrial property or portion would be landlocked, really. So I like it one thing, and I would prefer business than industrial.
Would you be in favor of that property being developed as a drive-in restaurant?
Possibly, yeah.
Well, again, it's permitted under business zone, and that means
Yep.
if someone comes in with a drive-in restaurant, we have to approve it. If we were to change this over to
Go
a
for
business
it,
zone.
really. As long as based on the history of the gentleman that owns this property, I think it's going to enhance it, because right now it's garbage. Right now it's blighted, and
Tony,
it's an embarrassment to the town.
I'm sorry, I don't want to speak over you, but you understand that our decisions don't go with persons or people, they go with property.
Yep.
So this applicant, although maybe well-intended, could turn around and sell this property tomorrow, and someone who maybe is less desirable will
Yep.
come in there and do whatever they want to do.
And that's why we have a planning and zoning, because they would make sure that there would be stipulation and regulations would be followed, hopefully.
I'm reading the regulations to you, that's why I'm asking
Yeah.
you questions. A bowling alley, would you be supportive of a bowling alley going
I
on?
have one down the street now.
But at that property, in your front yard, you would be supportive of a bowling alley?
It's my backyard.
Oh, your backyard, okay, I'm sorry. You're on that side of the street, so.
Yep.
You wouldn't have a problem with that, a billiard parlor, assembly hall, ice cream bars, dry cleaning establishments, plumbing shops, retail. and so on.
Right now, keeping that industrial, you could put a factory there.
Yep,
So that I would not want. If you want to know the truth, I would not want a factory there. I would rather have a business.
okay.
Because
And-
right now, the land is chopped up that it's limited what anybody can do. So it's either you don't pass this regulation, keep it industrial, and now you have one corner industrial and another area that's business, and now you're limiting what the person can do. So I'd rather see the entire area business. We have the Manor Inn, across the street from the Manor Inn, that corner is business. So right now, if that dark green or that green was industrial, then maybe I wouldn't be standing here, because I couldn't make that argument. But right now you have a portion of it business, and I'd rather have than the entire area business versus one chunk business, one chunk industrial.
Okay, let me just ask you one final one, right? I'm just playing out what's allowed under.
I appreciate that.
Because we've had a couple of these over the last couple of years, you probably know. Bus, truck, or car washes,
Yep.
you'd be okay with that? Okay. All right.
Yeah, because I'm confident that we have a Planning and Zoning Commission that will work with any applicant. And if it's, if it's business, they would have to meet all the stipulations and business regulations versus what's there now. Because right now, it's a blighted area. And it's an embarrassment to that, really. When we have people coming from out of town, I direct them the opposite way to come into our main entrance because that area is just horrendous. It's
Come in
an
the other
embarrassment.
driveway, right?
Yeah.
Down Clark Street. Go,
Yeah,
go,
right.
Go further,
Yep.
what, west?
Yes.
No, north. I don't know.
East.
East, yeah,
East. Go east.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're the guy,
So.
sulking.
Mhm.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Any other questions of Mr. D'Angelo?
Yep.
No? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate
you.
your input. Anyone else would like to speak on this application? Yep, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sandy Kasner. I live at 270 Copper Ridge Road in Southington, but I'm here on behalf of my daughter who lives at 231 Clark Street. She asked if I could come here on her behalf. Some of the things you were posing to Tony about what if the business use was a car wash or dry cleaners, I hear what you're saying with that because that could pose like an environmental hazard, for the land. But wouldn't industrial uses have those same kinds of risks depending on who purchases it and puts that use in an industrial way?
What I was outlining were permitted uses in business zones.
Right. No, I
I
understand.
just wanted to put it out there. So, the applicant could come in and say, hey, I want to put this strip mall here. It's going to be nice and blah, blah, blah. We could approve it. They could turn around and say, you know what? I don't want this. I don't have the financial resources for whatever reason. I'm moving or, I got family issues that aren't allow me to develop this. I'm going to sell it to somebody else. And all that other person has to come in and say, hey, I already have a B zone approved here. I have to put in an application to build whatever I want, whether it's a car wash. And I just ran down the list, right? A car wash or a printing shop or whatever it might be. Those are all allowed uses. I'm just putting it out there just to have.
It's 100%. I get that point, and I would be a little bit more concerned about something that could be posing, something that is an environmental issue for, my family that has housing there. But if it was industrial, it's not that you're removing that. If it's an industrial use that property owner has that as it's not removing that as a concern that, by not having it business or industrial, you'll safeguard yourself as a homeowner nearby to that site. I'm just logically, I'm just trying to understand what you're saying is true, but it's not taken away if it got to be, if that whole green and yellow is all industrial.
No, industrial uses, industrial regulations allow for different uses than what I just talked about.
But can they pose like environmental?
Sure. Yeah, but environmental concerns like that are guided by regulations of either the state, the federal government, or or water department or sewer department or any department like that.
And wouldn't businesses have regulations on them as well?
Well, businesses have regulations on them.
So it's like that is like, that's a risk, whether, for the residents there, either way, right. I guess is where I'm going with that. I'm really just confused. How did this even happen? I don't get this lot. How is this land? Like, how is anyone, how does anyone own that yellow? How can anyone own that yellow if it's landlocked? I'm very confused.
It was one parcel, it's one parcel, right?
Okay.
In 2020, an applicant came before this body asking us to convert that entire parcel over from industrial to business zone, right? The idea that they told us at the time was, I want to put a gas station, convenience store there, Jersey Mike's, all this stuff was talked about. We expressed a concern about giving away our industrial property, our industrial zone property. The applicant said, well, I don't need this section of the property, so why don't we just keep that industrial? And this was the compromise that I spoke about. Why don't we keep this part of the property industrial? All I need is this to build my gas station and what I'm planning on putting there, right? So we approved it. We changed the zone on this property to business while keeping this industrial. That was the sort of the deal, right? The applicant never built, right? Which I talk about, right? I mean, he can turn around and do
It
whatever he
happens,
wants to
right?
do,
Yeah.
And he never moved forward with it. I think he tried to, fits and starts, and never got here. But so now, I don't know, I'm guessing Mr. DiClemente bought it from him and said, okay, I want to do this. And he's asking us now to make that all business zone, the entire parcel business zone, because what he plans on doing encompasses something that he probably can't do in an industrial zone, but he can do under a business zone. So that's probably why he's.
So it is one lot, but the 2020 owner or potential buyer was going to have this one lot and use part of it in one manner and part of it in another manner.
I don't think that they ever intended to utilize the industrial part of that property.
Oh, they were just going to be like, it's fine, we don't even need it, just let it stay there.
Like, okay, yeah, we don't.
But in the future, this was going to always kind of come up because, like you said, property transfers happen all the time, and, so this is, whether we got there we're here now 2 years later or 20 years later, that is odd. I don't see, other than the tax benefits, that like you were explaining, like I didn't know that the town can get more revenue if a business is using that as industrial, and I get that. I mean, but this is just not going to work. And I totally can see this being better suited for business just because, my son was saying too, like there's a lot of homes there. There really are a lot of homes there, and they are very limited. And I know that what's that store, that Dollar General or whatever they call it, they're killing it. There's nothing there. So I think retail would be great. So anyway, I was just confused. I just want to understand that. But if there's no, I guess if your concern was if a business is a car wash or if a business is a dry cleaners or a repair shop or something like that, what could be some environmental issues with like people with wells or people, with the soil, but that doesn't change if it's industrial because we don't know what they're going to use, and that use can still put that in front of those residents there. Right?
I'm just outlining the possibilities
Okay.
of things that can go there and just having a dialogue about whether people would have a problem with that. That's all.
Okay.
That was my intention.
Does anybody, I'm just done. So I don't know if anybody has any questions for me. Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy, for coming out. I appreciate you talking to us. Anyone else have any testimony they'd like to submit on this application? See none, Seb? You or Peter want to wrap it up here?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two things. Many business users have good uses that don't have any environmental concerns, and if they do, they would have to obey about DEP regulations, state, federal, all those things, as much as or even more than industrial use property. The gas station that was proposed there, it's one of those uses that in a B zone, and you basically knew that that was going to happen at that corner and basically approved it. And that has fueling spots, which could, basically spill gasoline on the ground. So the environmental uses in a B zone could have been the gas station, and we're not proposing that.
Well, you're not proposing anything right now.
We're telling you we're not going to go for a gas station.
You are, but Peter could sell the property, as I said, and someone else can come in here and say, I want to do this here, right? So that's why I painted a picture of the worst, I'll call it the worst case scenario, just to make sure that people understand that 5 months from now, years from now, whatever, if it were to happen, it is a possibility that it could happen.
Okay, and so even if a
Sitting
gas
here-
station went there, they would have to obey by the DEP regulations.
Of course they would, right?
Okay. So the
Just as any other business that went there would
Yeah.
have to abide.
So there should not be a concern as far as the zone change request. The current, Mr. DeClemente did not purchase the property from the previous applicant. It's not like we switching it because we said something, now we said something different. He purchased from the owner. The owner was stuck with the property and he could not sell it. The demand is for business in this area. Noting what Mr. D'Angelo said, there's 98 units where he lives. There's 300 units coming up online in Cheshire. So the demand is for business, and it would be good business for this area. And as I said before, a lot of the business uses that in your list that you have there, they do not pose an environmental threat. Some of them they do, and they have to obey by the regulations.
So let me be clear. I was not going down the environmental lane. I was just talking about businesses that are allowed under the regulation in a B zone, what is allowed. I just went right down the list and just listed, there's probably a dozen of them, but I listed, half a dozen of them, right?
Yeah.
Just as under an I-1 zone, there's permitted uses. You know this, right? I'm just saying this could go there. Are you okay if this went there for someone who's coming and saying, I think we should develop it? I'm not taking a position on whether it's right or wrong. I'm just asking somebody who lives there. I have people who live in the Rivercrest area as well. So, and what we did 2 years ago, I remember them coming to me and having conversations with me about it. So I just want to make sure that everybody here understands what we're actually doing.
I'm glad you brought it up. So it's in the open so that people know what could go there. You're correct. But it is a site plan consideration. When something comes
Right.
before you, the next step will be site plan.
Agree.
And you could decide if you think it's an appropriate use based on the use or the traffic concerns or anything like that. So we would like you to consider this request.
Okay.
Thank you.
Peter, anything to add?
Just quickly.
Okay. The floor is yours.
Again, appreciate, what you brought up, and I appreciate the people who came out and spoke tonight, because I didn't speak to anybody. I didn't know the neighbors behind us. I didn't know these people, so I'm kind of excited and thrilled that they have the same vision of that property that I do. So I'm hoping that, the decisions made here, we can go forward and develop this. And just one more thing. Honestly, I think right now what we have is the worst case scenario. So, what I'm hearing tonight is I could put a gas station there and a factory. And I don't want that. I don't think our neighborhood wants it. So I just want to leave it at that. But thank you and appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks, Peter. Appreciate your comments.
That concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions of the applicant here? Is there any reason to keep this public hearing open in anyone's opinion? No? Staff, you good? You good? Okay. So we'll close that if there's no objection?
Nope.
All right. So moving on to the business part of the meeting. Item 9A, LePage Home Inc. subdivision application for a 12-lot subdivision property located at 347, 349, 389 Marion Avenue, Zone R2025, in an I-1 zone, S1337. I'm looking for a motion to table this item.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Cat with a second. Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 9B, AA DeNorfit Building and Development LLC, special permit application to construct an active adult housing development in an art zone with a private road, private public sewer, water, utilities, storm drainage, and other necessary improvements. Property located at 570 Meriden Waterbury Turnpike. This is, again, an art zone, SPU 666. This was tabled from October 18th. We just finished up the public hearing on this. Any discussion here?
Is this ready? So this is the, whether or not the development is approved, it's not site plan.
Site plan is next.
So that would be more contingent upon engineering's blessing and all that kind of thing. Am I correct, just procedurally,
Yes.
right? So this is just,
This is the.
are
this is the
they
overall
within
project.
regulations for arch
We got you.
zones? And do you want it, right? Not whether or not we approve the plan, right?
Right.
Okay.
Good.
So, yeah, one comment. I just want to make sure I say, so tonight we heard a neighbor applaud a developer for what Jim had pointed out as exceeding regulations. And that's not something we commonly see, but I dare to say it should be repeated. So I do want to say a thank you, and I support the development.
Is that a motion, Jen?
I will make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any other comments from the members of the commission?
No,
Peter?
Yeah, I'll echo Jen. I think, I started my comments with Steve, when I think you quoted our former engineer, Tony Tranquilis, which said, leave it better than you found it. And you came back here and did that. And so, and if you remember, I was not one of the initial supporters of this thing and made us come back for a second time, public hearing wise, earlier in the year. And I'm glad I did that to get a better view of things. And to echo Jen, I'll commend you for your efforts, and particularly working with town staff to make this good. And just to hear the back and forth that you had with the neighbors to make it better on a regular basis, even up to today, to echo Jen, should be commended. So thank you for doing that.
Okay. Any other comments from members of the commission? Anyone? Does this meet the regulations? It does? All right. I'll just finish by associating myself with the comments from the two previous speakers. A lot of times we sit up here, it'll be really quick, we sit up here and we ask people to reach across the fence and have a conversation with the abutting property owners to talk about what you want to do and make sure that they're okay, work out any differences. Mr. D'Onofrio and Steve and your entire staff and family, Tony, great job here. I mean, again, as Jen said, if we can duplicate this moving forward, then it would be easy, right? Far too often we come into situations that aren't like this. You've exceeded a number of the regulations that were noted, whether it's the affordable housing component, which requires a 10%. You exceeded that by 0.7 of a unit. So you rounded up. So that's good. Impervious pavement, you exceeded that regulation. You exceeded the regulation with regard to there's a whole bunch of them, so I won't go into it. But I really appreciate it, you all taking the time, and as Peter said, not just to talk to the neighbors, which is, to me, is the most important thing, but also to work with town staff in an earnest and thoughtful way to move this project forward. You all should be credited for that, and I think that you all did a great job, so I thank you for that. And with that, Marielle, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Caird,
Yes.
Alternate Commissioner Coles,
Yes.
Commissioner Santago,
Yes.
Vice Chair Salka,
Yes.
Chair Hammersley.
Members is a yes, 6-0, right? There's
Yes.
6 of us, so motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to the next item on our business agenda, 9C, A. D'Onofrio Building and Development LLC site plan application to construct an active adult housing development and art zone with a private road, public sewer, water, utilities, storm drainage, and other necessary improvements. Property located at 570 Meriden Waterbury Turnpike in an art zone, as I said, SPR 1844. Steve.
Mr. Chairman, again, for the record, Stephen Juice with the Office of Harry Colson, 876 South Main Street, Huntsville, here tonight on behalf of the applicant. I can go through the whole spiel again. I don't know if you need me to. I think Caleb did have a question
I
about.
need to hear, we can open up the questions, but if you have nothing else in addition.
Yeah, nothing other than I know that there was a
We,
question.
we went into some detail before, you went into detail before. So Caleb, do you have a question for?
Yeah, sure. I just have 3 quick ones. And these are site plan specific.
Okay.
If you can pull up the drawing, that would be helpful too, as we kind of go through this. But it's as we first pull into the development, on the right side, there's the pull in for the mailboxes.
Yes.
But how far away from Meriden Waterbury Road is that pull in? My question being is that I'm just a little bit concerned about possible queuing or people having to slow down from the highway to get into the entranceway.
It's quite a ways. The right of way from the edge of pavement, as you can see, the area that's not green there, that's not colored in, that's the state right of way. So, favorable. I'm measuring with my thumb here. I'd say it's 60,
3.5 thumbs.
60 to 70 feet
Oh,
away.
Oh, that's significant.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's to the very beginning of it. So once you get into it, you're probably 100.
Plenty of space. Is that area lit?
So we don't have lighting per se, other than just decorative, kind of more residential lights, post lights. So there is a light there, but it's not a big. It'll be lit, but very, very.
As far as
very lightly.
well,
How's that?
I mean, I guess to that, and I was thinking more of traffic, but now I'm kind of thinking that is it lit as far as safety to
From
make
a
sure.
safety perspective, yeah. It's similar to the streetlights, the decorative streetlights that we have downtown. They're just on a smaller scale.
Okay.
So something like that.
So then I'm going to jump to I think this is now the appropriate time to ask these questions. And I know that there's some engineering kind of in the background. So if you're still working through that, you don't have exact answers, it's okay.
Okay.
How deep is the overflow basin?
So the detention basin ranges in depth. The detention basin itself, grab my laser pointer. I'm sorry, I'm trying. It's really uncomfortable. I gotta be honest, this thing is like right in my face. So the detention basin, the main basin in this area runs, I believe it's about 4 to 5 feet of depth in that area. This other area here is shallower. I think it's about 2 to 3 feet, but in areas of 4 feet. But so this is the main functioning area in this area here.
So just so I can envision it, it's dug in.
It's dug in, yeah. That was one of the things we did at the request of one of the neighbors, was to lower this so it didn't have a big berm over here. So this is actually dug into the ground, and then this is also dug in this area here. And it's a little deceiving because, we have a slope that comes down into this area. So, along this edge, it looks deeper, but on this edge, it's not very deep.
It's pretty much level.
The top level with the grade adjacent to the property. But then the basin itself goes down 2 to 4 feet on the shallow end, and then I want to say 4 to 5.5 feet on the deeper end.
So there's nothing, the levee's not going to break, I guess is my question.
Right.
There's no levee there. It's just land.
At this location where the pipe is where the V of the topography is, where most of the water comes through. So in that area, there will be some fill. There'll be about 3 to 4 feet of fill, and just in this area. Originally, the design had the pond a berm filled all along this edge, but again, it was brought to our attention that that's not the best design. So we redesigned it. We lowered it so it's dug into the ground. So there's nothing to breach. Is the idea.
So further on this point, then the detention area, is it the intent of the detention area to have infiltration in a large storm, or is it the purpose of the pipe, the 24-inch pipe at the bottom, to receive most of the water and send it out,
So
or both?
the pond is designed to accommodate the volumetric storage that's required for the storm, regardless of infiltration. So infiltration is something that can happen under good conditions. It doesn't, on other conditions, bedrock, it doesn't necessarily happen. So what we try to do is we design it based on no infiltration. So the basin's almost oversized. If there is infiltration, it's a bonus. We get some infiltration. I think we will have some infiltration here, but the design isn't dependent on the infiltration.
So what you had mentioned that you dug some test pits out there. Is it sandy or is it more clay?
Well, we didn't honestly hit any groundwater in the test pits when we dug them. There were areas that were a tighter sand. There were areas where that was that red clay,
right,
that you're familiar with in this part of town. So it did vary depending on the depths and where we were. I think you will have.
I was looking towards like I think we had talked about perk tests. We didn't do perk tests. We did deep test pits.
We typically, if we were going to base our design on percolation, on infiltration, then we would do perk tests to try to prove out what the receiving soils will take. We didn't anticipate great perk rates here because of the red soils. But in any case, the design isn't dependent on the percolation.
Right.
So
I'm just seeing if we're getting
conservative.
extra.
I think you will get some, but I couldn't depend on it, I guess is what I was saying. In the
Fair
design.
enough.
A lot of the things I was talking about with the low impact design stuff tries to incorporate infiltration through, honestly, believe it or not, grass swales, overland flow. That we have some areas along the road that has we call infiltration trenches. They're just stone trenches along the edge of the road that as the water runs off, it has an opportunity. We may not care, get a 100-year storm into those things, but we are promoting infiltration throughout the site. In the old days, we piped everything, put in a catch basin, pipe it, discharge it. And that's point discharging. And that's not the most environmentally sound way of handling stormwater. We still have to do it sometimes, but in this situation, and honestly, because it's not a town road, we could do it without curbs, we could do it without catch basins, we could promote infiltration and low impact development techniques that the DEP and the state is really pushing. Jim will tell you that a lot of the applications that they have now, they're always trying to incorporate infiltration. So those techniques are incorporated into this plan. But we're not, the storage isn't dependent on it. The system's going to work even if if there's no infiltration, the system will still function properly.
I think it's well designed. I'll let Jim be the final judge of that, but it looks good to me. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Caleb. Any other questions for members of the commission? Jim, you want to talk about this one at all at this point, or?
Just from the standpoint, I'm still reviewing the drainage, so that would be the only thing to like to have another meeting on it.
Okay.
For the next
Does the
meeting.
commission feel comfortable making an approval on this with a stipulation that any outstanding issues be worked out to the satisfaction of the town engineering department? Are we okay with that?
Yes.
Just so we can move forward and you all can move forward and continue the fruitful conversations you've been having and move it along.
Mr. Chair, could we just, Jim, are you okay with that?
Well, if the stipulation should be the whole checklist, if we're going to do it that way.
I would agree with Jim. He submitted a checklist. We submitted responses. If any of his responses he doesn't feel are addressed adequately, then we would.
Well, I just sort of generalized it and said to the satisfaction of the town engineering department, which means that anything that is on that checklist and anything that might come up as a result of their responses to the checklist would encompass that. That was my intent.
I don't want to put any pressure on Jim either.
Would you ask?
Pressure's actually on you, but
Rather we table it?
Twist his arm a
Would you rather does it upset your timeline if we
It
table?
doesn't upset our timeline. I love getting an approval. I got to be honest with you, but I'm more than happy to table it if that's more comfortable.
well, I think that I think that we just move it along and have them handle it administratively. If the commission's okay with
As
that.
long as it's stipulated,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Well, I can't make the motion. I'm just trying to frame the motion for whoever might be the one making it, right? Yeah, no, please don't. And we certainly can't take any public input on this any further, so I think Jim is comfortable with working administratively. We've done this in the past and we haven't had any problems, so I don't see any reason why we wouldn't do it here either.
I guess, Mr. Chair, though, I would say if we go down that road, if Jim sees something that needs to be brought forth back to the commission, I would want that to happen.
Mr.
Now,
Chairman?
can that be part of a commission stipulation as well? So, I'm almost more comfortable tabling. If it was one thing, I'd say, yeah, no problem. But if there's multiple things, I think I'd be more comfortable tabling so that if there's multiple things, gives me more pause.
Mr. Chairman, the
Tony, yeah.
applicant would prefer a table.
You want a table?
Yeah, I just assume
I would rather-
let's all be on the same
Okay.
board. We don't want
Okay.
to have to come back and say, by the way, we disagree. And hopefully it should be a 3-minute hearing, meeting next time.
You just have to wait until after everything else because you're at the back end of the.
Oh, that's fine.
agenda, so-
That's fine. We can
Okay.
wait. That's
Okay.
fine. It's,
Then-
we've gone this
Okay.
far. We've tried to handle everything. and
So I just heard the applicant ask us to consider a table on this item. Do we have a
Yep, so,
motion for that?
Mr. Chair, I move we table SPR 1844.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second,
We have a second. Any discussion? Seeing
I feel
none-
more comfortable with the table, and I think we can keep the rhetoric down to a minimum once we open it up next meeting. I think we could, we refer to Jim, and if he
We're
said
going to let
yes,
Jim do the presentation.
It's like,
we don't need to go through this
it'd
again.
be like, it's like, Jim, yes, good.
Yeah.
You overestimate some things too much, but, whatever. Okay, with that, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thanks.
Thank you for your time tonight.
Yeah, we'll see you in a couple weeks. Item number 9D, Peter DiClemente, petition to change his own district boundary from an I-1 to B zone. Prior district boundary petition to change a portion of this parcel from an I-1 to a B zone was approved with modifications on 9/15/20, zone change 5666. Property located at 1608 Meriden Waterbury Turnpike, zone change 575. Discussion. Motion. Caleb.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve ZC 575, so we can get it on the table and discuss it.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? Caleb.
So I think that as when Seb was first giving this to us, I was pretty upset with it because I felt a little hoodwinked, as they say. But the fact of the matter is, besides the blight on that property, and blight can be, and things can change, and that's an enforcement issue, and I don't really want to hang my hat on that. However, I think that where I would hang my hat is that a parcel broken up like that is less effective in development. And I don't want to channel my inner Lou Perillo, but I think that he would say that there's a greater advantage to the town as using the larger space than breaking it up. And that's where I'm biting my lip a little bit. And I'm in agreement with, I think, everybody here that, I would have preferred it in the beginning to be maintained. However, it wasn't going to be changed to any sort of industrial use anytime soon. And frankly, it's on a state highway. It's close to residential. And the use of it now, it seems to be more appropriate, unless somebody's going to come forward and say, I'm going to change it back to I and put a nice job shop there, which I don't think is going to happen. I think that the only way to utilize that space effectively for the benefit of the town is to approve this.
Okay. Any other conversation or discussion from members of the commission?
Aye.
Peter?
Yeah, I think hoodwinked is a great word. And, well done there. I couldn't think of it, but I think that's as good a word as any. And I think it's kind of, for me, it's kind of a lesson back 2 years ago when we let the property be split. And we probably should have said one way or the other, because we created a landlocked condition. And so we are where we are. So I think your comments are right, Caleb, that now what? And we're in a now what? But I think the chair's conversation is valid in regards to we're creating now all our talk goes with the property, not a person who wants to do with it. And so I appreciate the chair's comments about scenarios and how things go. So I'm kind of biting my lip having to say yeah on this thing, simply because, I could kick myself for letting the situation be what we now are faced with it. And so I guess I'd be not happy about, because I don't like giving up industrial either. But I think given the type of property it is, where it is, I guess I would go along with it grudgingly.
Okay. Any other comments?
I would echo what Peter was saying with regard to grudgingly going. Nothing has really happened with this property. I mean, yes, we rezoned it to business, the front part. Nothing has really happened in the industrial section. This could sit here for a number of years and sit there as a blighted piece of property. And in the area that it's at, when you take a look at the type of businesses that are there now, I don't see a laundromat, because who's going to go to a laundromat in that area? I think you're going to see the type of business, small type business, that will facilitate the area that it's in. I mean, it's got to direct traffic. So, and because it is contiguous with already a small business that we rezoned 2 years ago, I would vote in favor of this change. If it was still industrial, I agree. But right now, the way this thing is sitting there, it could sit there for the next 10 years. I don't think anything's going to happen with it. I'd rather see something happen to get rid of the blight that's there now. So I'm in favor of this application, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any other conversations?
I know, I'm just adding to what's already been said here.
Go for it. Never
But-
stopped anyone else.
We hate to lose industrial zones, but, the current situation as it is puts a buyer at a disadvantage. We certainly don't want to lose an opportunity that's in front of us now. So I agree with everything we have just said here.
Okay. Jen? Anything? Not to put you on the spot?
No, that's fine.
You want to pile it
Talk
on?
about putting it on the spot.
I'll actually posit that I disagree with all of you. And I don't think anyone was hoodwinked. I think we should not be making assumptions. And I think this should be a warning to us to not make those assumptions in the future. So I think that now we kind of are backed into a corner because of those assumptions. And that's the reason I'll support it, because it's split and it's a disadvantage at this point. So we need to move forward with it.
Yeah, I agree with Jen. I mean, I'm really inclined to vote against this. Not as a reflection on anybody or that particular piece of property. It's a much broader reasoning. But it's one of those situations, as Jen said. I mean, we're backed into a corner now by our own doing, really. And shame on us, myself included. I was here when that happened. And I remember the conversations. It was not that long ago. But anyways, Mary Ellen, you want to call the roll, please?
I just want to mention that if you do approve this, can you add an effective date of November 19th, 2020?
Okay, so Commissioner Salka.
I'll amend my motion.
Good. Jen, you had the second on this. You good with that? Okay. The motion's amended, Mary Ellen.
Sorry.
Go for it.
Commissioner Clock,
Yes.
sorry. Alternate Commissioner Caird,
Yes.
Alternate Commissioner Coles,
Yes.
Commissioner Santago,
Yes.
Vice Chair Salka,
Yes.
Chair Hammersley.
Yep. 6-0. Motion
that
passes.
wasn't a yes, that was a yup.
No. I said that, right? Item 9E, acceptance of Willow Creek Lane as a town accepted street from Loper Street to Aspen Way, a distance of 1,950 feet, or 0.37 miles, Woodland Heights S1312.
Mr.
Oh,
Chairman,
yes.
the public improvements are completed and this item's are ready for action.
Okay. Any discussion? We got a motion on this? Do
Mr. Chairman, make a motion, we approve S1312.
you have a second?
Second.
Is that you, Caleb? All right, all those, I could do a voice vote on this, right? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 9F, reduction of a $6,000 subdivision bond to a maintenance bond amount of $8,000, Woodland Heights S1312. Jim?
Ready for action based on item E.
Okay,
Approval.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion for S1312.
we have a motion, second.
Second.
Jen with a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 10, administrative items. Are there anything? Mary Ellen, anything?
No.
I would just, again, remind everybody, I think Mary Ellen sent out information to everybody as a follow-up to our conversation at our last meeting about the affordable housing plan. If you can all take the time over the next month or so to take a look at that and to get your opinions, I guess we'll call them, back to Mary Ellen so that she could tabulate that and we continue our conversation probably at this point because of the schedule, probably not until January or so. But if you could just take a look at that, Mary Ellen, we also had a conversation about developable land. Did you send something out to anybody on that?
I did not, but I can send it out to them. I actually wanted to have Dominic pull developable properties in the B zone where it might be
Yeah.
allowed as well too. I just pulled the residential, but I wanted to get that too, and then I'll send it out.
Okay. So you can look for that information coming to everybody sometime soon as well. So as I said earlier, this will be an ongoing conversation I want to continue to have and be proactive about as much as possible. Unless there's anything else, we'll move on to item number 11, receipt of new applications. Mary Ellen, you want to talk about that?
There's just one for 113 Wedgewood Road. It is a special permit to construct a carport to an existing garage, and it will be a public hearing at your next meeting.
Okay. Anything else? Get a motion to adjourn.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Now I'm cleaning up my mess.